morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go ahead and go through most of these notes with you today. I will tell you we are not going to do every single problem on this worksheet. They're there for you for extra practice if you need them. I'm just going to kind of pick and choose and do a few as we go here. So let's take a look at the warm-up. We have Zach and Samantha, and they are solving that equation. Is either of them correct? Well, I hope that you realize that this is a squared term for my variable. I have an x squared and I have an x. They cannot be combined, and normally when we solve, we try and isolate the variable. So I can't isolate because I don't know which one to isolate. So this is where we've got to set them equal to 0, and we've got to solve. Okay, so if you look at that equation, in order to set it equal to 0, you would subtract the 12. And then you'd have an equation that was set equal to 0. The only person that did that was Samantha, so Samantha would be correct. Okay, notice she subtracted the 12, then she factored. She has two binomials, and then she set those factors equal to 0, and she solved them. So Samantha would be correct. I need to remind you, how do I have two factors that are multiplied together to be 0? Well, it would look something like this if I had two factors multiplied together to equal 0. So in order for that to happen, one of them has to be 0. Either x minus 1 has to be equal to 0, or 3x plus 2 has to be equal to 0. Has to. That's the only way to multiply to 0. So my two answers in this situation would be 1 and negative 2/3. Okay, this is a demonstration of the zero product property. Okay, and we've had this before, but the zero product property says if two quantities are multiplied together to be 0, then one of them must be 0. The only way to multiply to 0 is for one of the factors to be 0. So, like I said, I'm going to kind of jump around here. We're going to go through some problems. Some of them will be easy, some of them will be difficult, but again, just stay with me here. So taking a look at the front of your page, can you find a problem that is super easy because it's already been set to 0 and has already been factored for you? Well, hopefully as you're scanning over this page, your eyes are drawn to the bottom right-hand corner, to number 18. Because in number 18, it has already been factored for you. It is already set equal to 0. So all I'm going to need to do is set those factors equal to 0 and then solve them. Okay, when you do that, you should get negative 3 and 1. We're going to work our way across this row right here. I'm going to go to number 16. Please notice that number 16 is already set equal to 0. Please notice we have the x squared and the x. It's only a binomial. Remember, our first step is always to look for a GCF. My GCF in this case will be 10x, which means I'm taking a 10x out of both of those terms. I will have x minus 2 left. So this thing has now been factored. So if I want it to be equal to 0, one of my factors has to be equal to 0. My first answer will be 0. My second answer will be 2. Moving over there to number 17, you'll notice again I have an a squared and an a, so I've got to set them equal to 0. I'm going to subtract the 60a over, and my new equation looks something like that. Again, I'm looking for a GCF. In this case, my GCF is going to be 15a. So I'm going to take a 15a out of both of those terms, and I have a minus 4 left. Set your factors equal to 0 and solve them. I get a 0 and I get a 4. Okay, so that's taken care of across the bottom row. Let's go up to the next row above that. Let's look at number 13. Please notice in number 13, I've got an x squared and an x. Please notice it's also already set equal to 0. And it's a trinomial, okay? There is no GCF here. I can't take anything out of all of those three terms, so we're going to go ahead and factor it. Please notice it starts with a 1. The leading coefficient is 1, so I'm going to go ahead and make my two binomials. If I have an x squared to start with, I need an x and an x. Okay, my constant is a positive 14, so I need factors of positive 14 that will add to 9. Okay, factors of 14 that will add to 9. That would be 7 and 2. Because it's plus 14, that's a sum. I need the same symbols. Both of these need to be minus to make that negative 9 in the middle. So now you're going to set your factors equal to 0, and when you solve, you should get 7 and 2. Moving over to number 14. Again, I've got an n squared and an n. It's already set equal to 0, so let's go ahead and factor it. Please notice you have a GCF of 2 in this problem. So if I take out a 2, I'm now left with this, which is great because now my trinomial starts with a 1. So I'm going to go ahead and keep my 2 on the outside, and I'm going to make my 2 binomials. If I'm starting with an n squared, that means I need an n and an n. I need factors of this 15 that will add to 8. Well, that will be 3 and 5. Okay, since it's a sum of the 15, it's plus 15, my symbols need to be the same, and they will both be minus. Now, please note, when I set these factors equal to 0, there's 3 of them, but my GCF did not have a variable in it, so this will not give me an answer because 2 does not equal 0. My other answers will be 3 and 5. Okay, why don't you take a second, and I want you to try number 15. Okay, notice it's equal to 0. Pause this video, go ahead and factor out a GCF, and then solve it. I need factors of 40 that this time subtract to 3. And since we have a subtraction of 40, that means the symbols need to be different. It's a difference, and the bigger one will need to be positive. My 2 answers then will be -8 and 5. All right, so we've got the bottom 2 rows done. Let's go back and let's go across the top row, please. So I'm going to start over there with number 1. All right, notice we're set equal to 0. Notice that I have an x squared and an x, and we need to factor this thing. If you take a look at it, it doesn't have a GCF, and it doesn't start with a 1. So we need to go back to what we did yesterday. I'm going to take my 2 binomials, and I am literally just guessing and checking. I need factors of 8 over here, and I need factors of 3 over here. Well, the good news is there's only one set of factors for 3. It has to be a 3 and a 1. Okay, now for factors of 8, I can either do 1 and 8 or 2 and 4. So here's where the guessing comes in. Okay, I need to guess how I can make this 2 in the middle. I'm going to start with 2 and 4. So let's see if 2x and 4x works. If I do that, these 2 in the middle will give me 12x. These 2 on the outsides will give me 2x. Now remember, this is a -3, so these 2 things have to be subtracted. If I subtract them, I will not get the 2 in the middle. So back to the drawing board. Next, I'm going to flip-flop them. Let's see if I put my 4x first and my 2x second, if that makes any difference. So if I multiply these, I get 6x. If I multiply these, I get 4x. Remember, I am subtracting because of the -3 on the end, and this will work. Okay, this will give me a 2x in the middle. I just need to figure out my symbols. Well, since I'm subtracting, that means my symbols have to be different. And I want it to be a positive 2 in the middle, which means that 6 would have to be positive and the 4 would have to be negative. So that means this 3 would then be positive because that made the 6x, and this 1 would be negative. Now I'm going to set my factors equal to 0 and solve. Your first factor will give you -3/4. Your second factor will give you a half. All right, let's try that again in number 2. Same type of problem. It's set equal to 0. There is no GCF. It's a trinomial. So I'm going to go ahead and make my 2 binomials, and I'm going to start guessing. We've got some good news in this problem, folks. There's only one set of factors for 3, so this has to be 3n and n. The other good part of news is this is a 5. There's only one set of factors of 5. It has to be 5 and 1. So the question is, do I put the 5 here and the 1 here? Or do I put the 1 here and the 5 there? So that's the only guessing that needs to happen in this problem. Well, if you look, I'm going to put the 5 here and the 1 here because this will make a 5n. this will make a 3n, and we need to be subtracting. So if I subtract those, I will get this 2 in the middle. Please notice the 2 has to be negative, which means the 5 has to be negative, and the 3 would be positive, which means that would be a +1, and this would be a -5. If you set your factors equal to 0 and solve, you get 5/3 and -1. Okay, number 3, same type of problem, kids. It's already equal to 0. I just need to factor it and solve it. There is no GCF. Good news again, the only way to make this 2d squared is 2d and d. Now I do need to make a 7 on the end over here. So that has to be a 7 and a 1, which is fine because that's my only choices. So how am I going to strategically put them in these parentheses to make the 13 in the middle? I'm going to do 7, then 1. This will make 1d. This will make 14d. I need to be subtracting them because it's a -7, and it needs to be a -13 in the middle. Okay. So I think I'm going to go with the -14 and the +1, which means this would be a plus and that would be a minus. If you set those two factors equal to 0, it would be -1/2, and you would get a +7. Okay, so that's going across the top row. Okay, let's keep moving right along here. Let's see, where do I want to go next? Let's go down and we'll do this next row, and then we'll move on to the word problems on the back. Okay, so in number 4, I got to get this thing equal to 0 first. Well, I'm going to subtract the x, and I'm going to subtract the 3, and my new equation will be 4x squared minus x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, there is no GCF here, so we're going to go ahead and factor this thing. I'm going to have to guess because it starts with a 4, which means my choices are 4 times 1 or 2 times 2. Well, it ends with a 3, so that's good news because it has to be a 3 and a 1. So here's where we're going to start guessing. I probably would guess 2 and 2 first. Let's see if that works. This in here gives me a 6x. This out here gives me a 2x. They have to be different symbols. I don't think that can give me a 1 in the middle. Flip-flopping them won't help, guys, because 2 and 2 are the same. So we got to go to 4 and 1. Question is, where do I put the 4? Where do I put the 1? Let's guess the 4 here, and then just the x there. Yeah, this looks like this will work. This will give me 3x. This will give me 4x. I need to have a -1 in the middle, which means this 4 needs to be the negative, and then the 3 needs to be the positive. If you set your two factors equal to 0 and solve, you will get -3/4, and you will get a +1. Okay, number 5. Go ahead and subtract that 10 over. Got to get it equal to 0 first. So it looks like that. No GCF here. So I'm going to have to make my two binomials, and I'm going to have to start guessing. Well, the 3x squared has got to be just 3x and x. But we're going to have to guess on that 10 up there. It's either going to be 10 and 1 or 2 and 5. I think I'm going to guess the 2 and the 5. Okay. Again, you have to be willing to erase and redo it. Okay, if you don't get the right factors the first time. Oh, I don't know. I want to do 2 and 5. Let's do the 2 here and the 5 here. So this gives me 2x. This gives me 15x. And yeah, that'll work because that'll get me the -13 in the middle. If I make the 15 negative and the 2 positive, my two answers will be -2/3 and 5. Okay, so again, you have to be really willing to guess and check. Okay, so I think I am going to leave it at that for my portion of the front of this. I would like for you, again, I want you to do the following problems. Let's have you do 7 and 8. And then let's have you do 10. Okay, so you do those 3 problems. Any of the other problems you do not have to do, but feel free for them to be extra practice for you. Let's go ahead and go to the back, please, to those word problems. So we actually have some application of this stuff. It says a model for the height of the projectile is given by this function h equals negative 16t squared plus vt plus ho. Okay, h is the height, t is time, v is the initial velocity, so that is the initial speed, and ho is the initial height. Okay, so we're going to translate these questions into some equations. It says, suppose a cheetah pouncing on an antelope leaps with an initial upward velocity of 19 feet per second. So I have my negative 16t squared. If it's 19 feet per second, that 19 is going right in here for the v. And how long is a cheetah in the air if it lands on the antelope's hind quarter 3 feet from the ground? Now, HO is supposed to be the initial height. Well, this cheetah is on the ground, so it does not have an initial height, so I'm not going to put anything for the HO. Okay, but I do know how high I want it to end up. It's supposed to be 3 feet from the ground when it lands. So this is now the equation that I need to solve. I'm going to move that 3 over. Actually, I think I'm going to move the 16 and the 19 over so that the 16 is now positive, the 19 will be negative, and then this will be my equation. We're going to need to go ahead and factor this. I'm going to need factors of 16, which I'm going to have to guess on. I also will need factors of 3, but the only factors of 3 are 3 and 1. Let's try 16t and just t. Looks like that will work. We have a minus and a minus. If I solve these, I get 3/16 and 1. Okay, so it says how long is a cheetah in the air? I have 2 answers here. How do I know which answer is correct? Well, I need you to understand that when this cheetah jumps, it's going to make this motion. So this number right here is going to be on the cheetah's way up, so somewhere over here. And then this 1 is going to be on the way down or when it lands. So this answer right here is actually the one I'm looking for. It will take 1 second for the cheetah to land on the antelope's hindquarters. Okay, moving on. This time, go ahead and read it to yourself, and we'll go from here. You can see about 5 minutes. We're going to go down, okay? I want you to notice that they give you the equation for this problem, okay? Notice it starts at 506, which is why this 506 is on the end here. And they want the ball to land at 218 feet. Well, that's a height, folks. So that 218 is going in for H. And this is now the equation that I need to solve. I'm going to move everything to the left-hand side, so my 16 will be positive. So it'll be a positive 16t, a minus 48. Now this 508 goes with the 218, so you'll need to combine those together, and you should get 288. And now it equals 0. Good news for us is we have a GCF here. You can take a 16 out of all of these things, okay? Which will look something like this. And now this is much, much easier to factor because it starts with a 1. I've got t and t. This is going to be a 6 and a 3 to make that 18, and it's going to need to be a minus and a plus. So my answers here are 6 and negative 3. Well, it asks how many seconds was it in the air? Would it make any sense for a ball to be in the air for negative 3 seconds? Nope. So my answer is 6 seconds. All right, and our last one here for today. Go ahead and read it. Pause this video and go ahead and read that problem. They're giving you what the equation should look like. For this equation, I need to know how fast it initially started at and how high it initially started at. It says the launch pad was 2 feet above the ground. So that's going to go in for HO. And it says it was shot at 64 feet per second. So that's going to go for V. Please notice I do not need the 60-foot high pole, okay? But I do need to know where it landed, because that would be the final height, and that would be this 30 feet going in there for h. So my equation is going to look something like this. If I plug all that stuff in. Now we'll move everything over to the left, so the 16 is positive, and it will look something like this. I do have a GCF of 4 here, so let's take that out so my numbers are a little bit smaller. And I am going to have to do some guessing because it does start with a 4, but I do know it has to be 7 and 1. So I think I'm going to guess 2 and 2. And it looks like that'll work because this will give me a 14t. This will give me a 2t, which will give me that 16 in the middle, and they'll both have to be minuses. So my answers will be 3.5 and 1/2. Question is, which one do I want? Well, when this rocket goes up, it goes in this shape. They're asking for how long was it in flight. Well, this will be on the way up, this answer over here. This will be when it lands, which is what I'm asking for. So 3.5 seconds. Okay, folks, so again, you have lots of extra practice there. I had those 3 problems that I wanted you to do on your own. And I will see you tomorrow. And this is your homework. Thanks.